Hello, my name is Ameer Abbas. I'm a solutions architect with the Riverbed Storage Delivery Business Unit. And I want to take the next few minutes and talk about the business value of the Granite solution. As an IT director, as a decision maker from a branch infrastructure, there's a few factors that are fairly important to all of us. I'm sure CIOs think of a lot of things, but most of them can be kind of collapsed into a few major areas that I've written up here. As data sprawls continues to grow and the data is living outside of the data center with more than half of the corporate intellectual property sitting outside of it, data protection becomes very, very important. And not only from a backup standpoint, but also from the risk of loss of data and all the opportunity costs that are associated with that, as well as security. So if there was maybe an empirical way to measure data protection, I would perhaps say I would measure it in terms of our recovery point objective, or how much data would I lose in case of an outage or an event that happens. Maybe more important than data protection might be business continuity. If you look at a branch server, or any server for that matter, and let's say in an ideal world that server stays up for 100% of the time, it's not just the amount of time that server goes down at any given period, but it's also how long does it take to bring that server back to its life. And that really depends upon what the availability of that infrastructure or that server is going to be. So again, if there was maybe a measuring stick for business continuity, perhaps that would be my RTO, or my recovery time objective. How long does it take for me to recover a server? And then last but not the least, you've got this concept of administration. As we start to see these persistent and stateful branches coming up, obviously you have to manage that. You have to manage the servers, the storage, the backups out there. And there's some value associated with the administration, not just from a day-to-day perspective, but also what happens when something bad happens in a non-sunny day scenario when something goes down. Granite provides you better data protection, business continuity, and simplified administration for all of your branch infrastructure needs. Let's take a look at a life cycle of a branch server. So on the x-axis, I've got time. And on the y-axis, let's just say it's any branch server. And there's a few phases, there's a few stages that server goes through. And let's take a look at that. So from the start, the first thing you do is you provision that server. And then while it's up, you protect that server. So you're doing backups, maybe nightly backups. It kind of falls under the data protection realm. And then the server inevitably goes down, and then when it's down, you recover that server. So there are these kind of three very distinct phases and stages that any server goes through, and it becomes really more pertinent, more important when we're talking about branch servers. So if we look at what that server actually goes through, and on the y-axis, I'm just gonna say whether the server was up or down, and we look at these three stages, and maybe in a more traditional distributed manner. Let's say this was a branch server out there, a physical or a virtual server. It would take you some time to provision that server, right? And then that server will stay up, and then immediately that server will go down, and then it will take you probably a lot longer to provision or recover that server. Granite helps better all of these three phases of a server, and I'll show you how it does that. This time, we can look at maybe time to provision, right? It's the least painful phase out of all of them. It's usually scheduled, resources are allocated, there's not much, there's usually an outage window that it's done in. Then we go into the protect phase, and it becomes a little bit more interactive, right? So maybe you're doing nightly backups, right? So every midnight, perhaps, you're kicking off a backup, right? So it's a little bit more hands-on, and then the server goes down, and this is the most high-touch phase, right? Because this is unwarranted, unplanned, sometimes comes without warning, you don't know when it's gonna happen, and then this could take a long time. And some of the things that you do here is obviously you have to get the hardware out there, then you have to get maybe all of the data out there, right? And then you have to get an administrator out there to provision that server. So, and all of these have to kind of happen in a row to get that server to come up. So to define some of the other things here, this will represent our RPO, or our recovery point objective, which is normally or typically 24 hours, and that's what we normally see, which basically means is that when this server went down, you've essentially lost this much data, right? And then the most important one, in my opinion, is this guy right here, and that will be your RTO, or your recovery time objective. From the time that the server was down till the time that the server came back up, this is how much time it takes. So this is in a distributed world. Now let's see what would happen in a Granite world. Granite separates the storage from compute. You don't need 100% of the data out there. So with Granite, we can provision a server much, much quicker because we use very feature-rich resources, like higher end enterprise grade storage. You have better administration in the data center. All of the provisioning is done at the data center. You're just pushing play at the branch, and that's why using the Granite's intelligent prefetch and prediction algorithm, you're only sending the blocks that you need out there to get that server up and running. Same thing with recovery, which is way more important in my opinion. I would say recovery is in some cases even faster because that server is already provisioned, it's pre-configured, it's got the right IP address, the right DNS name, it's joined to the right domain and everything, and all you're doing is waiting for the hardware to come back, and as soon as the hardware comes back, the new Granite Edge arrives, we can just simply provision and project the same storage out to the new Granite Edge and then bring that up. Hence Granite Edge being stateless. What really truly matters is what's back at the data center, the consolidation piece. And while the server is up, what Granite also does is it's continuously protecting that data by bringing all of the changed blocks back to the data center. And it's continuously doing that through the Steelhead WAN optimization platform. So it's faster than normal 24 hours. So looking at all those three factors, three objectives that we defined, in the Granite world, this is now your time to provision. So we've made the provision phase much, much better by reutilizing the investment that we've made in the data center and making that phase much, much faster. Your RPO is also much, much smaller with Granite. This will be in the order of seconds or minutes, and that obviously depends upon how and where it's provisioned. But the most important one, again, I keep mentioning that, is the RTO piece. And not only is it faster, but we're providing all of these three phases without having any local administration out there. And when I say local administration, I'm not just talking about just helping hands that can unrack or unbox the Granite Edge and plug it in. I'm talking about a systems admin, a virtualization guy, or storage guy, or a backup guy, even for that matter. The higher grade administration is not required out there, right? So this is kind of the most painful phase of an administrator, or of a life of branch server, I guess, from that matter. And we've made that phase better. So again, kind of going back to our data protection, in the Granite world, we've only lost maybe a few seconds or minutes worth of data. So we've made the data protection better. Our business continuity is a lot longer. If we squint our eyes, one of the first things that I notice is that our horizontal line in the up column is a lot longer, right? So going back to kind of how we define availability is how often is this server up or how often is this server down. Now these outages are very, very small. So we've made the business continuity piece better. And from an administrative perspective, remember, we're reutilizing the investment made at the data center. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck anyway. So why not project it out and use it for your branch infrastructure? So I guess another way of looking at it is, in the data center, we have much faster RPOs and RTOs and much better administration. Granite allows you to project those RPOs and RTOs and reutilize those administration out at the edge. For more information, please go to www.riverbed.com/granite or talk to your partner reps or your sales reps.